was just saying there, Dominic, that he expects Liverpool to win something big this season, one of the two anyway. I think that Liverpool fans can start feeling pretty confident about life, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's been a very encouraging start of the season. I was just listening to the audio from Brian just then. There's been... It's felt all at the beginning of the season like it's been boom or bust, and I'll just explain that. I mean, by the first 7 games that they won, it was like, as you said, they're going to be all conquering. And then there was the 4 games where there was a bit of a blip against Napoli where they didn't play well and just ground out the draw against Man City, and then people starting to get very nervous that it might not be as rosy as they first sort of predicted. But I think you need to sort of go back 12 months, and at this stage of 12 months ago, they beat Huddersfield at home 3-0, and it was on the back of losing against Tottenham 4-1, and nobody was sort of making any grand predictions for what Liverpool were going to achieve. But then they got into this sort of run of form in the build-up to Christmas, where they started sweeping teams aside, and I can sort of see that happening now, because the work that Klopp has done with them during pre-season has been to be progressive and to be stronger later on in the campaign. He's had a lot of his players being away at the World Cup. A lot of them have had interrupted pre-seasons and preparations. I mean, Dejan Lovren was saying to us a couple of weeks ago when he was in Croatia that he doesn't feel anywhere near as fit as he would do at this point in time had he had a normal pre-season. So once all these players get into a groove, I think Liverpool are going to have a really, really strong season. And the fact that they've given themselves this foundation at the minute is very, very encouraging indeed.
In a strange way, Dom, I wonder if the idea of squad depth is just a new sort of thing to get used to for Jurgen Klopp, that obviously having more options automatically means that you think to yourself, well, the squad is automatically going to be better, the performances are automatically going to be better. But is managing a squad like that just kind of a new chapter in the Jurgen Klopp era that has just taken a little bit of time? It's had a little bit of teething problems, but now, having dealt with those teething problems, they're now ready to see the full benefit of having this deep squad.
Yeah, that's very true. There's another thing as well to consider. Is he's made a point of saying, particularly with the new signings, when Fabinho arrived, he played his first game against Chester on I think it was the 8th of July, and Klopp said that afternoon, he said it's going to take him time. And he didn't make any excuses about it. He said he's got to learn a completely new way of playing football, my style of football. The way Monaco played is completely different to Liverpool, and it's going to take him time to adjust. He said the same thing about Alex Oxlade-Chamberlain. He said the same thing about Andy Robertson. It takes them time to get how he wants them to play football. Just because they've had slow starts, it doesn't sort of mean that the duds or anything like that. It just means it's going to take them time to adjust. Liverpool's hit rate in the transfer market over the last couple of seasons has been remarkable in terms of those who've come in and made a difference. And I can see, Shaqiri, he's starting to have the kind of impact now that Klopp envisaged. Fabinho will have an impact, in the next 3-4 weeks when he's further adjusted. And you're dead right as well about what you said about the squad towards the end of last season, particularly in the Champions League final, because when Salah went off that evening, they basically played with 10 men for the rest of the match, because Adam Lallana just simply wasn't fit enough, and they didn't have the options. Daniel Sturridge had been at West Brom. It had been awful for him there. But he's come back and he's reinvigorated. So there's more and more options all over the squad. And as I said, that's another reason why I think Liverpool are going to be right in the mix for big trophies.
Just on Fabinho there, I think a lot of people last night might have been surprised with how good he was, not least because of some of the issues that you pointed out there, and that it's taken a little bit of time for him to even get into the starting 11 for a significant match. I guess what kind of epitomised his performance last night was that amazing pass he played for Trent Alexander-Arnold for a pretty big chance he had in around the 55th, 60th minute last night. I don't think too many people saw Fabinho as that Pirlo-esque sort of player, which is doubly important to Liverpool, considering the one thing you could level at them, particularly last season and the start of this year, is the lack of that really incisive passer in midfield.
Yeah, well, the thing about Fabinho is none of this will come as a surprise to Klopp, because 12 months ago Liverpool asked about him when it looked like he might be going to Paris Saint-Germain, around the time of Benjamin Mendy and Kylian Mbappe and all those type of players who were being plucked away by other big clubs. Liverpool were in the conversation for all of them. Thomas Lemar. They wanted to know exactly what was going on. It wasn't the right time for Fabinho. And then obviously when because they had Emre Can, and when it became clear that he wasn't going to be sticking around for this year and he was going to try something else, then that's when they moved for Fabinho and got it tied up very quickly. So they've known that there's a player that can come in and make a difference. And as I said, it's simply been adjusting, working out how Klopp wants to the methods that he wants to imply and get used to it. Once he's up and running, I'm sure you'll see sort of more instances like that becoming regular.
Can I just ask you about that hit rate that you mentioned in the transfer market? Who is behind that? Like, who's responsible for this? Because when you compare their success with, say, how Spurs spent the Gareth Bale money all those years ago now, it seems, but like, and the ability that Liverpool have had to diagnose their issues and sign players according to that, it seems really obvious. They needed a goalkeeper, they got one. They needed a centre-back, they got one. They needed better midfielders, they got one. They needed depth up front, they've got that. Whereas it's precisely the type of failing that we've seen at big clubs, particularly in England. Arsenal could not fix this under Arsene Wenger. Man United just can't do it at all, it seems, at the moment.
Well, you're dead right there on Manchester United. There's no sort of rhyme or reason in how they're buying players, but Liverpool, I'll just a brief sort of outlay on how they do it. They have this well-established transfer committee. It's headed by Michael Edwards, who's the sporting director and a hugely influential person, great eye for detail. In terms of a player, he does the negotiating for contracts and players with agents and things like that, but he works very, very closely with Jurgen Klopp. No player will come to the club unless Klopp is absolutely 100% happy. There's other people involved, such the head scouts and player recruitment is Dave Fallows and Barry Hunter. And then you have, in terms of the making things happen in terms of finance, it's Mike Gordon, who's one of the members of Fenway Sports Group. He's the club's president. He's the man who makes sure the funds are available. And they've been very, very specific in terms of the scouting that they've done. And I know they've sort of made headline-grabbing buys in terms of Alisson Becker for 65 million and the 75 million on Virgil van Dijk, but I think it's deals like Andy Robertson for 8 million and Shaqiri for 13, having the foresight to be aware of that sort of release clause that he had, quality players for not that big a price, and you're seeing now that they have this great squad that's able to compete. But as I'm sure we'll get to, the big thing is whether they can actually win something, because it's all very well saying, isn't this great, but the fact of the matter is Liverpool have only won one trophy since 2007, and Jurgen Klopp, the players, everybody knows that they have to address that.
I have one last question on the transfer committee before we get to whether or not they're going to win anything, and that is that when the transfer committee kind of first became part of the public consciousness, the manager at the time was kind of using it as something of a shield, or it just certainly seemed like the football cognoscenti were like, hang on a second, this is never going to work. The manager's supposed to buy the players, or the sporting director's supposed to buy the players, and your head coach coaches them, whereas this kind of seems a weird hybrid where the manager has some say, if it's final say. When Brendan Rodgers was there, this kind of seemed like something that was going to hamstring the club. Now with Klopp, it seems like they've discovered the perfect way to run a football club. It's like a bunch of people come together, collectively decide what our needs are. There's the guy who's a brilliant negotiator negotiates it. The manager manages it and says, yeah, that's it. That's the player I want. The scouts feed into that. It's like maybe they have discovered through trial and error over a period of time, and maybe it didn't work with Brendan Rodgers, but is this now the perfect system? Is it just because Klopp is such a genius?
Well, I don't know whether Klopp's a genius or not, but you're right. Finally, this is what when Fenway came in, just over 8 years ago now. This is what they wanted. They wanted a director of football. They wanted a coach with foresight, progressive. They wanted a young playing squad, and they made mistakes early on. There's no doubt about that. Damien Comolli never worked. Roy Hodgson and Kenny Dalglish, they weren't the type of managers that they wanted. I mean, Kenny did a great job stabilising things after the turmoil that had gone on as the takeover and Rafa Benitez leaving, and the Roy Hodgson spell unfortunately never worked out for him. Brendan had a. I don't think you should sort of underestimate that season that Brendan had where they nearly won the league. He had some fabulous players, and Coutinho and Sturridge were the best examples of the transfer committee working perfectly under his watch, because Coutinho was only £8 million and Sturridge was 15. So they were two prime examples. They also bought Dejan Lovren as well. Let's remember, and he's turned out to be. It took time, but he's got there. He's become the player that they thought he would do. There were mistakes. We all know them. Barini, Markovic, Ricky Lambert. It never worked out for him, unfortunately. But now this is exactly what they wanted, and it's working perfectly. They would say, and they've got the squad into such a position of health now that any buys that they have to make are going to be, it's going to be minimal. There's not going to be sort of major surgery needed where they're going to have to buy 4 or 5 players every summer. Yeah,
it definitely seems like it's taken over nicely, and even if somebody comes calling for Firmino, for example, you just feel like they'll be able to replace him with a like for like or promote from within. Are they going to win something this year? Because it feels like all of the accoutrements you need for success are right there at the moment.
As good as they are in the Premier League, I still think there's something about Manchester City that they're just. I think it's Man City's to lose. If I'm honest, I still think they're the best team in the country. They've been very ominous over the last few weeks, particularly without De Bruyne. The amount of goals that they've been scoring. Liverpool aren't too far away from them. In Europe, anything can happen. They showed that last season. Fully expect them to be in the knockout phases, and then literally anything can happen. Particularly with the backing at Anfield, and then you have the FA Cup. The FA Cup is probably the easiest one for them to win. I think the FA Cup would be a great one for them to win. Anything, they just need a big day out and a trophy, because it's been too long.
Fair enough. Dominic, great stuff. Great to have you on this morning. Thanks a million.
Pleasure, gents. No problem at all.